Boker Tov. Boker Tov. Good morning, everyone. So first, a reminder that Mishloach Manos Committee. What do they need, Mishloach Manos Committee? Okay. So speak to Debbie about Mishloach Manos. Number one. Number two, let's thank our sponsors for today's shiurs. Number one, to Alan Zuck, who's celebrating a birthday, a significant birthday.
It's scary when he's the youngest person.
Also, so Mazel Tov, indeed, many more years in good health to go, and also Mazel Tov to Herzl Naomi Lipner on the bar mitzvah of their grandson, Sano Tuvia. So Mazel Tov, a lot of nachas, right? You had the nachas, you should have nachas. Also, we thank Lisa and Ken Kenterowitz, who are sponsoring it to commemorate 2 yard sites. So on the 23rd of Shvat, Lisa's father, Larry Nathanson, Yehuda Leib Ben Yoshua, Zechron Livracha, and Ken's father, Moshe Kenterowitz, Moshe Nathan Nosanaron, Ben Yitzchak, right? Zechron Livracha, Neshama Shabbat Aliyah. We do thank you for the sponsorship. Are you ready for Parshas Mishpatim? On page 416, where you are going to be introduced to the civil law. We've talked about the civil law in the past, it's okay. And we talk about the fact that, Nachmanides, Ramban, in the 13th century noted that the construction of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan, was for them some kind of structure that could carry on the events of Sinai. In other words, the people of Israel were in awe due to the special effects of the revelation of Kabbalah Satorah. The nation wanted continuity of it, and the Almighty said, okay, no problem, we'll construct Mishkan. Eventually, that Mishkan will gain permanence, and it will have its presence on Har HaMoriah with the Bet HaMikdash. So it's all a continuity of the revelation at Sinai. That's what Nachmanides points out. And it's interesting, there's a relationship, in Zmirot Shabbat, we call about that Shamor v'Zachor. It's mentioned that these statements were taught at Har Hamor. Har Hamor. So it refers to Har Sinai. Commentators note that there was a bloom, that the mountain came to life, and among them Mor is one of the identifying plants that came to life there, but it relates also to Har HaMoriah because Mount Moriah, right, the revelation and our attachment to that location is due to the fact that there was a revelation. We view it as some kind of continuity. That's what Nachmanides notes. So now, as a result of that, we just read last week about the revelation. Next week, what are we going to talk about? The construction of the tabernacle. Why does the civil law make its appearance here? All right. So what we're being told is you want to build a religious society? Great. But you got to be sure that you have a legal system where there's an understanding that righteousness is not just achieved in the house of prayer or in the house of study, but rather it's achieved when you are honest in the marketplace and you are sensitive to the property of others or to another human being, even if he is, for whatever reason, sold as a slave. The civil law, it is in part impossible to create a society that is only based on religion. Okay, there has to be decency and understanding that honesty is an integral part of such a civilization. So therefore, says Rav Hirsch, and just read his words, that you should know that Mishpatim, these laws, make their appearance before the construction of the Oil Moed, because Binyana Chevra HaYehudit, he didn't say this in Hebrew, he said in German, you'll forgive me, I'll go to Hebrew, okay? That the way you construct a Jewish society has to be based on the ikaron of tzedek, righteousness, ve'enoshiyot, and enoshiyut, humanity. View the other person as a person, not an object. Right? We interact with others as objects in the street. If someone's in your way, right? Someone and you just view them as an obstacle, so you have just made a person into an object. That's not the Jewish way. Enoshiyut. This is what Rav Hirsch tells us how we're supposed to look as we walk in to this parasha. Fine? Now, one more thing Nachmanides notes is that you should know, when we heard the 10 sayings, we're very careful not to call them the 10 Commandments. With all due respect to Charleston Heston, right? We don't call them the 10 Commandments, we call them the 10 sayings. Why? By saying 10 Commandments, Genuk. No, there's 613 of them. Okay, very important to remember. Now, after we hear the 10 sayings, at the end of last week's Parsha, the Torah added a few details, and all of them are subcategories from those that appear in Aseret HaDibrot. In other words, Aseret HaDibrot talked about not to create foreign images or images to worship. So therefore the Torah adds, Elohei Chesed, Elohei Zahav, Lo Tasulem. In other words, some enhanced details are given to clarify that which appeared in the Aseret HaDibrot. Comes Nachmanides and he tells us, you should know, that this complete Parashat Mishpatim is linked to the 10 sayings as well. And every detail that you will read about here is really as an expansion of that which is mentioned in Aseret HaDibrot. Now, you're going to ask the question, wait a second, but a lot of it is civil law. Where does the civil law, in what way is the civil law referred to in the 10 sayings? Is there anything about a civil law there? So Nachmanides says the following that you should know. In the Aseret HaDibrot we are told, Lo tachmod. What does that mean? Not to be jealous or covet that which belongs to someone else. Okay? So let's say I have a lawn chair, right? And I left my lawn chair on my front yard. My neighbor knows that other people in the neighborhood at times put things by the curb. And my lawn chair happened to be on my front yard, but he felt, it's very possible. Curb, front yard, what's the nafkamina, right? He came with his rabbinic thumb, and he takes my lawn chair. I come and I want it, and I say I would like it back, and he claims no. So am I supposed to feel, the Torah says I shouldn't covet, maybe it is his. So therefore I'll be machmir and not try to get it back, because I don't want to violate what the Torah says. I should not desire that which belongs to my neighbor, and it's possible that it belongs to my neighbor. Now, why is that absurd? If it's yours, it's yours. Take care of your property. Defend your property. If it is not yours, obviously, then you have to understand you don't make an issue. So how do you figure out what's yes mine and what's yes yours, what's not yours? How do you figure it out? The answer is you have to study the legal system. You have to study civil law. And that's what Nachmanides tells us, that this parsha that's telling us that you should know in situations you owe money to someone, and if you don't pay him, he perhaps has a right over your property or some kind of a lien on your land. You have to know what's considered yours, what's considered not yours. Therefore, we have this civil law. You've heard, we've talked in the past about the Chazon Ish, Rabbi Mishayahu Karebetz. A great rabbi in Bnei Brak, a very humble individual. You cannot understand Israeli society today as a whole without understanding this individual. Now, what's interesting to note, and there has been an attempt to cover up one of his philosophies. He was critical of the Musar movement. How can you be critical of those who focus on sensitivity and on self-improvement? That was the Musar movement, that they would sit there at times even for hours and think about the fact that we're temporary in this world and therefore we're here to achieve our mission. We should be sensitive to the welfare of others. right? How can you be critical of such a movement? So in one of his sections, he writes the following. Imagine you have the following scenario in town. And some note that it's very possible he was referring to an event earlier in his life, that there's a shtetl, and there's a Melamed Tinaikis in the Cheder. You know, are you familiar with the Melamed Tinaikis in the Cheder? He was the Rebbe, right? Who was the Rebbe in many situations? At least in the past, if he couldn't do anything else, right, he would teach. That was my father would share with me the story how there was a shochet in town, right, and he was getting older. He was getting older, like in the olden days. 70 was old, not anymore, of course, but in the olden days, 70 was old. So he was an older person already, and his hand, 60 is really young, that's for sure. Yeah. So his hand was shaking, and he couldn't shecht anymore. So a few of the leaders in the community said, "Oh, okay, so he can't shecht, right? He'll become a melamed tinoikis." Now he did not have the personality to deal with kids. So when the Rav heard about it, he said, "You know what's going to happen? He's going to shecht the kids now. You know? That's what's going to happen." So a melamed, the melamed was not always the most qualified. So they have this town, and there's an old melamed. He's been doing it for decades already, and he's already his stick. He had to get a few sticks already over the years because the earlier ones already wore out from clapping the kinderlach. Av you probably could remember from the old days. Now, suddenly a new 21-year-old guy comes to town, right, with enthusiasm and excitement, and he becomes a Rebbe, and he opens a little cheder competing with the old cheder. Suddenly they realize that the kinderlach are coming home from the new 21-year-old Rebbe all excited and happy because he's enthusiastic. He has a Hasidic background, so he believes in what he's doing actually. And he comes with a spirit, and the kids are singing the Mishnayos. And when there's enthusiasm, we all know what makes a good teacher? Enthusiasm. So what's happening is that little by little people are leaving the old 78-year-old Rebbe, and they're going to the 21-year-old. Okay? Parnasa, he can't feed his, because you know how it worked. At the end of the month, they would send a few coins. So the members of the community get all upset, and they say he's taking away the Parnasa of the old Rebbe. And they start protesting, and they threaten the fellow to stop teaching, to leave town. He won't leave. They slash his tires or whatever it is. They break his axle. They start damaging his property. They start throwing bricks at his windows, and they're right of him to be sure that he leaves town because he's a varian. He's a terrible person. He's taking away the parnasa of the old established Rebbe. He's been doing it for 5 decades, right? So what do you do in such a situation? So Chazon Ish notes, if you work with musar only, if you work with feelings, if you make your decisions based on emotions, you say, oh, he's 78-year-old, he's been doing it for so long. What kind of chutzpah does the young man have to come and take it away? Let's indeed do whatever we can to get rid of this new Rebbe. That's if you work with emotions. But that's not how decisions are supposed to be made in Jewish law, or really in any law. You're supposed to figure out first who's right and who's wrong. How do you figure it out? Look at the Talmud. And the Talmud tells us that you should know the concept of taking away someone's livelihood does exist in Judaism. If you have an alleyway, right, we are told in the Talmud, and someone has in the end of an alleyway a pizza shop. The Talmud doesn't mention pizza actually, but they have a pizza shop. And you go ahead and open another pizza shop in the front of that alleyway, where the only way to get to the old pizza shop is passing by a new pizza shop. He's not allowed to do it actually, because you're taking away the parnasa of the pizza shop. The concept is true, but the Talmud tells us that when it comes to the study and teaching of Torah, competition is good. Why? The free market is good. When there's a free market, what happens? Everyone tries to bring forth the best product, and that's what we want. We want the best teachers. We want the next generation to be inspired by teachers who believe in what they are doing and walking with enthusiasm. Kinas sofrim, when there's jealousy among scholars, you increase wisdom. So therefore, you be using your emotions to feel bad for the old Rebbe when in reality, by chasing out the young Rebbe, you are a violator of Jewish law. If you make decisions based on emotions, you could be going against Torah. That's what the Chazon Ish knows. Don't make your decisions only based on what you feel. And Musar for the Chazon Ish was focusing too much on feeling. If this sounds foreign, think about Palestinian causes, right? People who, it's already old news now, but it already was developing in Europe, right? Feelings that we need to do something for the Palestinians, and therefore we'll support the PFLP, right, and the PLO, because reality is, look how the Palestinians are suffering, and there are terrible images you could see of because they are suffering. So if you only work with emotion, right, what's going to happen? You turn into a Bernie Sanders, which is not a good thing, right?
God forbid.
What?
God forbid.
God forbid. God forbid turn into such a... It's interesting when you talk about Europeans. I was reading just recently that in 1969, there was an El Al flight that was departing, I think it was Zurich, and a few Palestinian PFLP terrorists were shot at the plane. And there was an Israeli, it was a new thing for an Israeli, a guy by the name, I think, Mordechai Rachamim. It was a new concept that they had marshals on the plane. But the Europeans did not approve of Israelis coming in or flying in with guns. So this fellow, Mordechai Rachamim, when he was on the plane and they were shooting it as it was taking off, he jumped off the plane with the back exit, shot killed one Palestinian. In other words, one fellow with his little pistol was somehow able to get rid of a whole team. But he was arrested by the Swiss, and he stood trial. Right? And you think, what is going? If you think about the mishugas that's occurring, that's the roots. That's the beginning of the mishugas. When people make decisions based on what they feel, you see images. That's what we are being told. So now, with that, we can understand what's taking place in Parashat Mishpatim. The Torah tells us, "Lo tachmod," don't covet, right? You see something that belongs to someone else. Well, now you have to figure out what is yours and what belongs to others. Study the legal system. Study Parashat Mishpatim, right? There are scholars that put a lot of time and effort to understanding the laws of what's known as Choshen Mishpat. Choshen Mishpat. You have to know the legal system. There's a civil law. That is what is required to be a good Jew. So this is really an introduction to what's taking place here. So here we go. The Eile HaMishpatim, and these are the ordinances. Asher. So you would expect the Torah to tell us Asher Telamdem. Wouldn't you expect that you teach? Page 1416? 1416 actually. Right? You should teach them, but how does the Torah introduce the legal system? Asher Tasim. Place it in front of them. So there's a well-known Rashi. And Rashi tells us that this does not just relate to the legal system, but all mitzvot that are mentioned here. Many mitzvot are mentioned in this parsha. And it's telling us that the way you teach Torah is not by just shoving it down the students. Not just telling them you got to do it and don't ask questions, but rather you should place the laws in front of them. In the words of Rashi, Keshulchan Aruch, like a set table. You come into a house and there's a beautiful set table, right? Beautiful set table, right, with nice dishes and crystal, and help me out here with china and silver, and now they have these plates. Under the plates, they have a name for charger. What is it for? Though I'm not sure, but it looks nice, right? And then you have the cloth napkins and different glasses. And it is very, confusing for a Pashto person to know which spoon to use. But there's something, when the food is presented nicely and the table is set nicely, it enhances the experience. And therefore, when it comes to the study of Torah, it shouldn't be just as information that we have to do because we have no choice. Don't ask questions, do it. Your father did it, your grandfather did it, your grandmother did it. Fregnishkin kashas, just do it. That doesn't work. There's a whole generation that's not interested because that approach was taken. People that, I'm not going to come to shul. It meant nothing to me as a kid. I did it because I had to. That's not going to work. When does it work? When it's presented to them in a nice way. When it's set up in front of them like Shulchan Aruch. My father would add that you add flavor. In other words, when we talk about mitzvos, how do we call explanations given to why we perform specific mitzvot? We call them ta'am ha-mitzvah. Ta'am is a reason, but it's also flavor. And when you look at foods, often the flavor is not what gives you the nutrition. The flavor is there to make it more desirable, to enjoy it more. And here we have plenty of artificial flavors, right? Even without the flavors, it would be edible if it is edible, right? But the flavor, what's flavor there for? To make it more enjoyable. And that's how we're supposed to give ta'am ha-mitzvot, right? And for many, we're in a generation that people need reasons to do something, right? Why am I doing it? I want an explanation. What am I achieving with it? So therefore, that is part of the tasim lifnehem. Fine. Next verse, ki sikneh, when you purchase a what? A Hebrew slave. In no way does Judaism believe that we're dealing here with an ideal, right? Don't view slavery as an ideal. This was an issue in the United States as they were preparing themselves for the Civil War in 1860, right? And you had sermons from many ministers who, if they were in the South, and they turned to the Bible, and the Bible talks about slaves. So how can the United States, right, consider it illegal when it's in the Bible? This was a claim. And if they would have asked a knowledgeable Jew, he would have responded, Torah is not telling you that this is an ideal. It's telling you that if it exists in society, this is how you deal with it. Don't view it as an ideal. And it's important to keep that in mind when you read many sections of the Torah. The Torah is addressing realities. Some realities are nasty. Some realities are good. The nasty realities we have to address to make them as good as possible. Hebrew slaves existed. In many situations, it was due to the fact that they were criminals, that they stole, and they owed money, and the courts would be the one to monitor the sale, that it was done appropriately, and for a limited period of time, max 6 years, because it's not an ideal state to be lacking your freedom. Jews should be free beings to make their own decisions and not be controlled by masters. So that's why the Torah introduces the Hebrew slave as an Eved Ivri, not Eved Yisraeli, not later on Eved Yehudi, but Eved Ivri. Now, if I remember, my older brother collected stamps, and he had some stamps from Israel, from the early years of the Jewish state of Israel, and it was called, could be even perhaps even only the first year, was known as Doar Ivri. And there were stamps that had an Doar Ivri. I wonder if he still has it. Maybe we could sell it on eBay and it has some. The Doar Ivri. Ivri, right, is a term of Hebrews, makes its appearance quite often before the Torah was given, right? Yosef in Egypt, right? The Egyptians would not eat with the Hebrews. And it most probably referred to anyone that came from Canaan. Because in Canaan, when the family of Avram made their way there, others came as well. And they were all called Hebrews, okay? So the term Ivri makes many appearances before Matan Torah. After the Torah was given, our identity is no longer as Ivriim, right? Do you ever walk around and ask you, "What? I'm a Hebrew." I don't think we say that. Maybe they have the Hebrew Africans or something. But we as Jews don't call ourselves Hebrews. We call ourselves Yehudim or Israelim. Okay. Hebrews, very little. After the Torah was given, if I'm not mistaken, there are only two situations where you find a person being labeled as an Ivri. One is here, the slave, and the other one was a person who was in a challenging situation, who made a mistake, and when he was asked to present his documentation and identity, he declares, Ivri Anochi. I am an Ivri, and that was Yonah. Yonah, right? Yonah? He's on the boat. He's he's on the ship, and there's a tumult there, and everyone's turning to their gods, and they turn to him, and he's passive. He's reading, the New York Times or writing for the New York Times, and asking, "Why are you not involved in Ivri Anochi?" So it's interesting. Why in these two cases a person called an Ivri, right? The primitive term. So Don Yitzchak Abarbanel writes about 500 years ago. If you look carefully at the word Ivri, it relates to the word Avaryan, someone that over al halacha, someone that violates Jewish practices. Avaryan, avar, in other words, there are boundaries that were established at Sinai. You transgress those boundaries, you are Ivri. Makes a lot of sense here, Eved, he was Ivri, he transgressed things, and therefore, unfortunately, the courts have to take over the situation and sell him. And Yonah himself, he sensed, I did something wrong. Ivri Anochi. Okay? That's what he knows. Now, it's important to realize that there's a message there. Jews could walk around feeling that we're different. We're just different than others, which is fine. But if you focus too much on the fact that you are different and don't focus on what your responsibility is due to the fact that you are different, you could be creating problems. In other words, we are different. There was a statement made hundreds of years ago, I think in the Rashba, En pirud halevavot ke pirud hadatot. Meaning, if you interact with someone that's really, really a believer in a different faith, you can never get very, very close to them. Because I'm deeply committed to my faith. They're deeply committed to their faith. We're going to see things differently, right? Because our hearts are separate. We're separate entities, right? I have a friend that mentioned here, a pastor, a very special person. But the bottom line is that there is some individual he believes in that I don't, and there's going to be a significant difference. Pirud halvavot from pirud hadatot. Accept that. However, a Jew should not walk around thinking, I'm different, period. And due to the fact that I'm different, what they think about me is not important because I'm different anyway, right? So, there was an Israeli beer. Maybe it's still around, but it's obviously not one that that I drink. It's called Maccabi beer. Does it still exist? I don't know. It does? Is it good? No. Okay. So Maccabi beer. So I remember as a child that they would advertise that you would see these Israelis, 1970 Israelis, and they would be on a plane, and they're loud and they're like enjoying themselves, drinking the Maccabi, and on the bottom it was written, Ba'olam omrim sheze chutzpah Yisraelit. In other words, they call it chutzpah. Okay, now, from my understanding, at least at age 10, is that the message there is that, we enjoy ourselves, we're different, right? We're Israelis, we have our own wonderful beer, right? We have that which we enjoy. We consider ourselves different than everyone else. Now that's dangerous, because in no way is the Jewishness supposed to be that I could do whatever I want. Jewishness is to feel the responsibility. I'm a or lagoim, right? Mamlechet Kohanim, we're like priests. The priest is supposed to teach and inspire. We're supposed to teach and inspire. We're supposed to be like those people. We mentioned here Jason Greenblatt, that when he finishes with working with the Trump administration, he says, I'm not going to write a book because I don't speak Lashon Hara, right? That is the type of Jew. He's different. He's different than everyone else. Because everyone else that works for any administration in Washington, all they do afterwards is go ahead and publish their book, sell it, and make money. Yeah.
I think there's a big difference between being different and feeling that you're special. Because when you're special, then you're haughty and you think you're above everybody else. But I think there's too many people today, young people today, that don't think they're different, and that's why there's so much assimilation and intermarriage and all that other kind of stuff.
No question. And I think it's a good starter to feel I'm different, but let me understand why I'm different. In other words, it's a starter. And that's those same Israelis that are in that advertisement for Maccabi, The nice thing is that hopefully they're still in Israel. And as a result, hopefully their children are still interacting with Jews. In other words, the difference is good as a starter, And I think that's the message with Yonah as well. Yonah says, listen, Ivri Anochi. However, I recognize that I am different and I want to reestablish my relationship with God. It's a good starter. By the way, Israelis outside of Israel is one of the scariest things. Now, if they are linked still to a synagogue or they send their kids to Jewish education, okay, that's good. But when Israelis are completely detached, it's tragic. It's tragic because within a generation or two, what's going to be left? You know, my older brother was sitting. He was at a conference. You know, he lectures a lot on areas of finance and retirement and whatever. All these things, I have no clue what he's talking about. So he was at this public lecture, and he was with this professor of economics from Stanford. And you know, they disagreed on some matter. There was a little bit of a discomfort. So each one of them is like working on his slides for his presentation. And the Israeli, did I mention this already? No. Lior, I think his name is Lior Einav. Turns to him and says, Milevsky, Israeli obviously. Milevsky, wait a second, Milevsky, are you related to Aaron Milevsky? So my brother thinks, Aaron Milevsky thinks about my son Aaron. He says, yeah, I'm his uncle. What do you mean? No, can't be. Aaron Milevsky, I mean, passed away in 1986 already. In other words, he was talking about my grandfather. So anyway, after a little bit of thing, so my brother says yes. Says, oh, okay, so we are cousins. What happens is that my grandfather, Aaron Milevsky, had a younger sister, Ethel. And Ethel has a daughter, she's no longer alive, Ethel, but daughter Matya is alive. And this is, basically there were second cousins sitting there, and suddenly they became best friends. A small Jewish world. Fine. Now, unfortunately, as my grandfather went to Yeshiva, my grandfather grew up in very challenging times. World War I, his mother passed away from illness, he was bar mitzvah, he was in a hospital with either the Spanish flu or with TB for a few months. The younger girl, his younger, like the tsaris of shtetl were there. And as a result, the kids grew up with nothing, and the younger sister went to Israel completely secular, Tel Aviv secular. They lived in Tel Aviv. We used to go as kids, my older brother and myself would go, we were in yeshiva for a few years in Tel Aviv, and every single Friday at 4:30 p.m. in the summer, they had on TV the A-Team. I don't know if any of you are from the 1980s. Yeah? Okay, so that was my Hana once a week. The one thing we would go watch the A-Team by great aunt Ethel, and she had one shelf on top with two glasses that were known as Rabbi Milevsky glasses, meaning two kosher glasses. That she was careful, knowing that when her brother, she was very close to her older brother, and even though she was completely secular and he was a very religious Torah scholar, so we would drink Coke in the Saba glasses. That was Ethel. So here we have it, the grandmother who still saw religion and Judaism left, it became Tel Aviv. The daughter grew up already in Tel Aviv. The grandchildren, he's in California. What do you think the kids, what kind of chinuch do you think the kids are getting? To such an extent that when my older brother made a mistake and asked something about the Ethel, like who said Kaddish for her, he got this look and like with this, like an emotion with that, like what we don't believe in it. Like, as if, what are you, crazy? Like Kaddish? Like, so it's something that it shakes you when you see the Ivri element, that eventually disappears. So that's one of the beauties, by the way, of the Jewish state, that those who stay there have something that keeps them Jewish. And therefore, by the way, support of Zionism is so significant as well, especially for secular Jews. When a secular Jew has at least a connection to Torah by being committed to his people and to Eretz Yisrael, there's something there. It's amazing. When on the other hand, in the United States, they're going to vote, what's the percentage of Jews that are going to vote Democrat. I mean, not all. I'm not going to put down all Democrats like others do, right? Even though you're sponsoring, the fact is there is a difference between Democrats. I'm not going to compare, all of them, but Bernie Sanders, can you believe that there are Jews that are going to vote for Bernie? Like, these are things. So, anyway, politics aside, you know at least a little bit of what the Chumash is telling us. It's an Eved that he is a Ivri. Okay, let's get to something a little bit that is in the parsha itself. So we're gonna move forward to page 434. Is that okay? 434. So here we go. Transportation. You transport things from place to place. What do you use today? Pickup truck. Anyone have a pickup truck in Memphis? In Memphis, there was an old Rabbi Kuttner, was his name. He was in his 90s, and Rabbi Kuttner was driving a pickup truck. That's the minhag, the Rabbi Kuttner was shown. So now, in those days, they didn't have Rams pickup trucks, but they had donkeys that were not trucks. Okay, donkeys were used for transportation, and often you walk into an elevator, right, and it says max load 12 people, and you're counting 24, 25, 26, and you're getting nervous. So this is what occurred actually with their donkeys, that they would at time overload their donkeys. And imagine you're walking down the road and you see a donkey that the owner was not sensitive enough, did not follow the instructions that were printed on the side of the donkey, and the donkey is starting to collapse. Fine? Now, the person this klutz that overloaded the donkey happens to be someone you can't stand. Okay, so you have here a situation that two things are going through difficulty here. The owner and also the donkey. And the Talmud has a discussion in the following verse. So here we go. Ki tireh, you see it's the top of the page. When a person, if you see the donkey of chamor sonacha, someone you hate, and the donkey is overloaded and it's rovetz, it's what's happening, it's crouching under the masa, the burden. So the Talmud asks, wait a second, vechadalta me'azov lo? Would you think of refraining from helping him? No, don't do that. Azov ta'azov imo, you shall. Azov ta'azov. Help him. Surely help him. The double language in the Torah is always surely do it. So far so good? How do you say help in Hebrew? Azor. What is Azov? Is Azov? What?
To leave.
Okay, so the first one is v'chadalta ma'azov lo, prevent yourself from leaving him. It's a good reading. But what is azov ta'azov imo?
Don't leave until you've done your job. Leave with him.
Leave with him. Azov, leave with him. Okay. So Rashi tries, and this is what Rashi had knowledge in all of Tanakh, and he found a pasuk that exists in Nehemiah. Vayazvu et Yerushalayim ad Choma, and he found a few times in Tanakh that the word Azov actually relates to Azor as well. Okay, so Rashi there's no problem with it. Another logical explanation is that how do you assist a donkey that is overloaded? Not that I've done it or seen it, but it appears you have to cut ropes, right, that it should let go of the burden. So there is a letting go. Azov is letting go. There is a letting go of the burden. Fine, also makes sense. Okay, now, if you look at Unklus here, Unklus is an Aramaic translation. It is a very old translation, right? It dates back to a scholar in the 2nd century. And the information he used was traditional information, meaning he didn't come up with it on his own, but he turned to scholars who had old traditions as to how to read a verse, and that's what he put in the verse. Okay? And there's an incredible word here that, it's interesting that Rashi doesn't focus on it, But here we go. Are you ready for Aramaic, everyone? So it's on the middle section there on the left. And it's Ari Techazeh. So we can start with the word Techazeh. You see that? What's Chazi? Chazon, it's a vision, when you see. Chamra, easy one. Chamra, Chamor. Desanach, also the Aramaic is very close to Hebrew of your soneh. Revia is like rovetz, it is collapsing. Tachut is tachat. To'aneh, it's what? It's load. So far so good. Vetimna, should you prevent yourself melemishbak, from helping? Lay, we're skipping the parentheses. But rather, what you should do, line 3, and here we're getting to the key words. Mishbak tishbok, you shall surely let go. Ma develibach alui, that which is in your hearts. Forget your animosity. Beautiful. Let go. There is a letting go. Remember, it's a person you hate. And your natural feeling is when you see this guy from a distance and the animal suffering, you think, oh, finally he's going to be struggling here. Right? Imagine he's your competitor in the marketplace. You're both going to the marketplace. And you're going to get there first. And he's always the chayaro, reduces the prices at the end of the day, and you have to stay late. You're happy to see him suffer. Torah says, no, that's not the way to do things. What do? Let go. Let go. Right? People who could let go, right? They had who posted, some of the kids showed a video in the plane, on a plane, just the past few days, of two people that they got into a fight, that she reclined, and the person, this is just the tail end of a whole flight of entertainment. They don't need screens because they were fighting with one another. If one of them would just say, you know what, the person is a little bit of a pain, let go, just sit straight, it's not, but humans have to overcome those tendencies. If we don't do it if we don't get trained at a young age, right, it gets, from what I understand, more challenging, right? That's what, you have to have that ability. Let go, okay? Azov, let go of what is in your heart. Very, very powerful message, but there's more here. It's interesting that the first v'chadalta me'azov lo is clearly letting go, but it's a little bit more. We'll share with you the following. There is a story, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, and Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was a person that had his opinion about education, right? That you have to study Musar, that righteousness. And when he was in Kovna, he was in charge of letting other speakers come in and speak, and he only would allow speakers that would follow his way of thinking. Like he didn't want to confuse the students with different philosophies, so he kept the curriculum controlled. And as a result of that, there were people who would complain about him. There were people that would cause him sorrows. But he was very, very determined to stick to his policies. So there was someone that really got upset with Rabbi Yisrael and cursed him out in public, right? And claimed that he's not such a great scholar, we should start ignoring. Now, the fellow eventually realized that that's a big no-no. You don't do it to someone that's considered the greatest mind in the whole city. So he came over to Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, and he says, I would like to ask Mechila. And Rabbi Yisrael said to him, tell me, do you have any challenges right now? Do you have any challenges? He says, yeah, right now I have a situation, some kind of financial matter, I'm looking for a loan. Rabbi says, good. Rabbi Yisrael runs out and finds someone that could go ahead and assist him. And before he was able to respond to the person asking for forgiveness, he arranged for him the loan. Fine. And then he said, yeah, 100% I forgive you. So it was surprising to the students who were around. And they asked Rabbi Yisrael, what was that about? In other words, this is a person that just insulted you. The first thing you were determined to do is what? A big favor. What's the logic behind it? And you went out of your way. In other words, you had to nudge someone, you had to go ahead and communicate with another individual. What was that about? So Rabbi Yisrael Salan says there is a rule in the laws of Tumah and Tahara. And here we go. You know that vessels are susceptible to tumah. It was a very serious issue in the days of the temple, where every child knew that is yes pure, that is not pure, because it would affect your ability to make your way to the Bet HaMikdash. If I have a piece of wood, right, not just a piece of wood, it's not susceptible to tumah. When does it become susceptible? When can it become tameh? When I make it into a vessel. Imagine you do some woodwork, or Aaron Olav used to do woodwork, right? So imagine you're doing woodwork, and I create a bowl, but it's not finished yet. It's not finished yet. And at some point I decide, you know what? I'm gonna just use it as is. That's called a machshava. The minute I have that machshava, and I decide I'm gonna use it as is, even though it's not finished with some kind of sandpaper, even though I didn't make any designs, which I originally thought I'm gonna do, it becomes susceptible to tumah. Okay? If let's say 2 minutes later I say, you know what, no, I'm gonna put some more time and effort into it and enhance it. I cannot revoke. Once I had a machshava cannot be motzim yedei machshava. In other words, a thought to go ahead and change it, right, and thus make it again into a non-final product is not strong enough to uproot the original machshava. But if I take out some sandpaper and I continue working on it, or I take out some utensils to start making designs on it, that's called already a ma'aseh. A ma'aseh in action can uproot the original machshava, and suddenly now it is not susceptible to tumah because it's not a final project. Okay? Says Rabbi Yisrael Salant, if I have a thought, if I have an emotion, right? A person insulted me. It is natural to have a feeling, a machshava, of being angry towards him. To go ahead and just think, okay, now I'm not angry, that's not going to work, because a machshava cannot uproot a machshava. What could uproot a machshava? Ma'aseh, action. So Rabbi Yisrael, when the person asks for forgiveness and he knows that he has to uproot the feeling of animosity towards him, how do you uproot it? With a ma'aseh, an action. What action? The action of kindness. So therefore he ran to go ahead and try to do a favor, a ma'aseh, to uproot his personal machshava. And that's what Rabbi Yisrael says is in this pasuk as well. When you have hatred, right, and you see him suffering, this is an incredible opportunity. It's an incredible opportunity because you could suddenly go ahead and get rid of your hatred by helping him. So if you see it, v'chadalta ma'azov lo, it's your opportunity to let go. You could do an act of kindness. Surely you should go ahead and help him, which is also a process of letting go. It's the same word. When you are azor, you are also azov. When you go ahead, and it's a fact that you have a feeling towards someone, when you go ahead and turn around and do acts of kindness, those feelings are gone. Incredible insight that relates to the Parsha. Thank you again to our sponsors. Thank you for coming, and everyone have a good day. Yeah.